When the lone survivor of a long-ago farmhouse tragedy finally stepped back onto the land that had once been his family's, the first words he spoke made the local caretaker's blood run cold. What seemed like a heartbreaking accident at first slowly revealed an even darker reality, one that threatened not only his life, but the lives of anyone who dared to seek the truth. This is a story of betrayal, resilience, and the relentless fight for justice. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe no hidden secret should stay buried, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Nathan Bishop parked his aging pickup at the side of a deserted country road, rain pattering lightly against the windshield. He stared through the blurred glass at a patch of woodland he had not seen in many years, thick, ancient trees as old as any memory he possessed. Beyond them, a faint trail led toward land that had once been part of his family's farm. Though 2 decades had passed, the recollection of that night remained vivid. He remembered a storm-lashed sky, the flicker of lightning on the horizon, and the smell of smoke so overpowering it had choked his lungs. He also remembered the heartbreak, the sense of utter helplessness when he realized he was the only one who escaped the flames. The authorities had called it a tragic accident, a case of faulty wiring in an old house. Yet here he was, 20 years later, feeling that the official explanation had never quite fit the depth of his family's final hours. He turned off the engine, letting the drumming of raindrops fill the silence. His mind flashed back to the battered envelope he had received just weeks before, mailed without a return address. Inside, there was only a single typed note. "Your father was right. Look deeper. They're still watching." At first, Nathan had been tempted to tear the note up as an elaborate hoax. He'd spent most of his adult life trying to distance himself from that night, burying his grief in a succession of menial jobs, never forming lasting friendships. Yet he couldn't dismiss the subtle sense of dread it awakened in him. He'd thought his father, Graham, was just an ordinary man, with typical financial worries and a passion for standing up to local injustices. The letter suggested otherwise. Something bigger might have snatched away his family under the guise of a house fire. He popped open the door, letting the rain pepper his shoulders. The forest surrounding him felt watchful, leaves rustling in the breeze. Thunder rumbled far in the distance. He grabbed a small flashlight from the glove compartment and began walking along the overgrown path toward what used to be the Bishop farmhouse property. Tall grass brushed his boots, and droplets clung to his jacket. Up ahead, silhouettes of blackened timbers stood like skeletons in the gloom, a sad monument to the night he lost everything. He paused when he reached the boundary line, unsteady. A single mailbox still stood crookedly by the roadside, the name Bishop barely legible through rust. The sight of it made his throat tighten. 20 years ago, he had been a boy of 8, skipping down this lane with his older brother, Luke, on sunny afternoons, never dreaming calamity loomed. Now Luke was gone, and Nathan was here alone, with only ghostly memories and a cryptic note urging him to seek truths no one had wanted to face. Lightning flickered overhead, followed by a drumroll of thunder. He advanced carefully through the wet grass and mud, scanning the remnants. Large sections of the farmhouse had collapsed after the blaze, leaving behind a foundation of scorched beams and crumbling stone. In the intervening years, vegetation reclaimed the area, weeds sprouting through cracks, vines creeping along charred wood. Rain pattered on everything. The smell of damp earth mingled with the faintest whiff of old ash, or perhaps that was only his imagination. His hand trembled as he swept the flashlight beam across the rubble. He remembered the official conclusion, that an electrical fault had sparked the fire, turning the wooden structure into a death trap. His parents, Graham and Caroline, were declared dead at the scene, alongside his brother, Luke. Nathan had survived by leaping from a second-floor window after the hallway became impassable with flames. In the hospital, doctors praised him for his bravery, but it never felt like heroism. It felt like abandonment. He had left Luke behind. He stooped near the scorched remains of what was once the living room, tears burning in his eyes. He could almost see them all. Luke sprawled on the couch reading comics, Caroline humming in the kitchen, Graham tinkering with some project. Nathan sniffed, blinking back emotion. For years, he had convinced himself the official story might be right, that it was simply a heartbreaking accident. But the note, combined with fragmentary memories, his parents whispering about hush money, about someone following them, pushed him to question everything. A twig snapped behind him, causing his heart to lurch. He spun around, flashlight slicing through the darkness. A figure stood there, half obscured by the rain. Fear jolted through him, but then the figure raised a hand in what looked like a placating gesture. "Nathan Bishop?" a woman's voice said, carrying over the quiet storm. He felt a quiver of recognition. "Who's asking?" She stepped forward into the feeble light. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, wearing a plain brown raincoat. Her dark hair was flecked with silver, pulled back in a low ponytail. Her eyes were intense, weary. She spoke calmly, "My name is Evelyn Rice. I was once an arson investigator around these parts. I was assigned to the Bishop fire, but I never believed the official conclusion. I heard you were back." She paused. "I'm sorry if I startled you." He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You have a knack for appearing out of nowhere." She gave a slight nod, her expression apologetic. "I've been driving past on and off, hoping to find you here. I realized you might return. The local chatter said you inherited some property from your uncle. When I saw your truck on the roadside, I took a chance." Rain trickled down Nathan's collar, making him shiver. He studied her carefully, trying to sense if her intentions were genuine. After a moment he said, "Why didn't you believe the official story?" Evelyn sighed, stepping closer to the rubble. Her gaze swept across the blackened remains as though haunted. "Because there were too many anomalies. A neighbor reported seeing a black SUV parked nearby that night, footprints that didn't match your family's, an abrupt order from my higher-ups to rule it an accident and move on. I tried to push for more investigation. My superiors shut me down, said the evidence was conclusive. It smelled like a cover-up. I never forgot it." Lightning lit the ruins once more, illuminating Evelyn's face. Nathan saw sincerity in her eyes, along with an old sorrow. She continued, "I suspect your father was onto something. Maybe he was in over his head. Someone wanted it buried. If you found anything that might shed light on the truth, I'd like to help." She held out a business card. He took it, reading the simple printed text that declared Evelyn Rice, independent fire consultant, plus a phone number. His mind churned. He had discovered no new physical evidence, only the letter urging him to look deeper. But Evelyn's words validated his misgivings. "I haven't found anything concrete," he said quietly, "just my doubts. My memories of overhearing them mention hush money or secrets. I can't recall exact details, I was so young." Evelyn nodded sympathetically. "If you do find something, documents, photographs, an old diary, call me. We might piece together a case. If there's a bigger reason behind the fire, the statute of limitations might not apply for murder." Murder. The word dropped into the space between them like a dead weight. Nathan felt his pulse thrum. I'll call if anything comes up." He swallowed. "I'm not sure where to even look." She gave him a faint, sad smile. "Sometimes you'd be surprised what relatives leave behind. A hidden trunk, a lockbox, maybe old letters. If your Uncle David never had much contact, maybe he stored something for you." She stepped away, the wind tugging at her coat. "I'll let you be. This place must be painful." She left him with a flicker of hope, or perhaps anxiety. He thought of the small hunting cabin he'd inherited from David, located in a more remote corner of the county. Maybe that's where he should start. Without further ado, he returned to his pickup, mulling over Evelyn's words. The headlights cut through the rain as he navigated back to the main road, passing fields cloaked in darkness. The farmland that once belonged to his family was now a sorrowful memory, but the letter had told him to seek truth, and that was exactly what he intended to do. He spent a restless night at a cheap motel in the nearest town, thrashing in bed with half-lucid dreams of the fire. He saw Luke's face, contorted with fear, disappearing behind a wall of flames. He awoke sweating, a tightness in his chest that wouldn't subside. Dawn found him already in his truck, heading toward the cabin David had left him, a property he barely knew existed until the lawyer's phone call. He needed answers, and soon. The cabin was tucked away at the end of a narrow gravel path that twisted through dense woodland. Overhead, the sky cleared, letting morning light peek through canopies of oak and pine. Eventually, he spotted a small wooden structure perched by a winding creek, complete with a sagging front porch and shuttered windows. The place felt lonely, half-forgotten. But it was his, apparently. When he found the hidden key under a loose board, he unlocked the door and stepped inside, braced for musty smells and dust motes swirling in the sunlight. The interior was cramped but serviceable, one main room with a table, an old couch, and a bookshelf, plus a tiny kitchen area and a single bedroom. The air smelled stale, like it had been sealed up for years. He opened windows to let fresh air in, rummaging around to see what David might have left behind. The shelves held random hunting gear, a stack of outdated magazines, and a few battered novels. He found no personal letters or diaries, nothing that screamed hidden secrets. Several hours later, on the verge of frustration, he noticed a small door in the floor under a threadbare rug near the bed. A padlock secured it. Heart pounding, Nathan rummaged for tools, eventually prying the padlock loose with a crowbar. The door squeaked open to reveal a concealed compartment that housed a single metal box. He pulled it out, coughing at the swirl of dust. The box's lid was unlatched. Inside lay a weathered photograph, a child's braided bracelet, and a leather-bound journal. He froze, recognizing the colors in that bracelet immediately. It was Luke's. His brother had worn a braided band of bright threads, refusing to take it off even at bedtime. To see it here, in David's cabin, sent a jolt of emotion through him. He carefully lifted the bracelet, turning it over in his hands. Next, he picked up the photograph, grainy, possibly taken years before the fire. It showed Graham Bishop shaking hands with a tall man in a dark suit, their expressions solemn. The background was unfamiliar, but the tension in their posture was unmistakable. Then he turned to the journal. Opening the cover, he saw Caroline Bishop's name scrawled on the inside page. His mother's handwriting was etched into his memory, from the notes she'd left in his lunchbox, the to-do lists pinned on the fridge, and the bedtime stories she wrote for them. He flipped through, heart-hammering. The early entries were normal, recipes, day-to-day musings about the kids, small drawings of farm tasks. Then the tone shifted. References to Halverson and Kent surfaced, describing how Graham had come home late, worried or angry. Mentions of dirty money, possible child trafficking, offshore accounts. Nathan's brow furrowed. He read on, seeing how Caroline's fears escalated. She wrote about being watched, about a black SUV parked down the road. Graham won't accept hush money, read one line. He says we have to blow the whistle. But I'm afraid for the children. Another entry mentioned a fight between Caroline and Graham. She feared the consequences of speaking out, while he believed doing the right thing outweighed the risks. The final lines were enough to make Nathan's blood run cold. We can't hide this forever. If anything happens, it won't be an accident. The man in the suit, he's threatened us twice now. Graham believes we should try one last time to gather proof. I just want to protect Luke and Nathan. They're all that matters to me. Breathing unsteadily, Nathan realized he held the seeds of a different story, one of conspiracy, intimidation, and possibly murder. Could Halverson and Kent have arranged the fire to silence Graham? That would explain the hush money references, the black SUV, the swift closure of the case. The words, child trafficking, lodged in his mind, horrifying in their implications. If his father discovered a ring funneling illegal funds, that might be enough to drive powerful people to kill. Shaken, he packed the journal, the bracelet, and the photo into his bag, intending to call Evelyn Rice. But first, he took a moment to compose himself, leaning against the cabin's rickety table. Memories of Luke, side by side with him in bunk beds, assaulted him. He pictured Luke's grin, the scuff of his sneakers on the farmhouse floorboards, the smell of hay from the barn they played in. Was it truly possible someone orchestrated his brother's death? The rage and grief inside him churned, fueling a determination he had never felt before. He dialed the number on Evelyn's business card from the landline phone in the cabin, relieved it still had a dial tone. She answered on the third ring. When he told her what he found, her voice quivered with a mix of excitement and horror. I always suspected something like this, she said. Caroline's diary could be the key. Where are you? I'll drive over. They met at a local diner half an hour later. Nathan spread the items out discreetly in a corner booth, and Evelyn read the crucial passages with mounting alarm. This is bigger than I thought, she murmured. Child trafficking? Offshore accounts? Halverson and Kent was no small firm. They were a known financial powerhouse in the region. If your father threatened to expose them, that's ample motive for them to stage an accident. She tapped the photograph. This man. Do you recognize him? Nathan shook his head. Never saw him clearly, but I do recall a tense night my father argued with someone at the door. I was half asleep, but it felt ominous. He paused, mind racing. We need to find out who he is. Evelyn nodded. Facial recognition software might help if we can digitize this photo. Also, there might be more clues in old local records, or among Halverson and Kent's collapsed archives. They declared bankruptcy shortly after the fire, which always struck me as suspicious timing. But it never made the big headlines. They spent hours debating their next move. Evelyn, once a respected arson investigator, was forcibly sidelined back then. She believed her superiors might have been pressured by someone with enough money or influence to hush it up. Now I'm free of that chain of command, she said grimly. I want to see justice done for your family. Nathan thanked her, the gratitude raw in his voice. He felt less alone in his quest. He told Evelyn about the confusion he faced regarding Luke, how he had always blamed himself for not saving his brother. Evelyn offered a sympathetic squeeze of his hand. You were 8. There was nothing you could do. The words brought a tear to his eye, a meager comfort amid 2 decades of guilt. They arranged to meet the next day at the county courthouse archives to glean any further data. Nathan spent a sleepless night at a local motel, the diary's lines replaying in his mind. Thoughts of child trafficking made him sick. Could his father have been that close to unmasking a vile underworld? If so, how high did the corruption go? The next morning dawned gray and humid, as though nature sensed the weight of what they were about to uncover. At the courthouse, they sifted through dusty boxes, scanning old property records, insurance documents, and the original Bishop Fire case file. There were glaring gaps. The investigation photographs were missing, official statements seemed incomplete, and references to any suspicious vehicle had vanished. Evelyn's mouth tightened as she flipped through pages. Someone definitely sanitized these records, she said, glancing around as though expecting someone to jump out. We're dealing with professionals. A partial breakthrough came when they discovered a cancelled life insurance policy for Graham Bishop dated mere days before the fire. The reason listed was non-payment, which contradicted a note in Caroline's diary stating they had just renewed coverage. If your father believed an accident might happen, wouldn't he ensure his policy was current for the family's sake? Evelyn reasoned. It's possible Halverson and Kent forced its cancellation to prevent any post-mortem payout. Another puzzle piece. They left the archives laden with a sense of unease. The more they learned, the clearer it became that powerful individuals had orchestrated a cover-up. Nathan felt anger simmering beneath his grief. He wanted to find whoever had burned his family alive and watch them brought to justice. As they emerged onto the courthouse steps, thick clouds overhead threatened a new storm. Evelyn pointed to a figure across the street, an older man in a threadbare coat, seemingly watching them. When she glanced again, he turned away, disappearing among the foot traffic. We might be attracting attention, she muttered. Not wanting to be followed, they split up, agreeing to reconvene that evening at the cabin. Nathan kept an eye on his rearview mirror but saw no sign of pursuit. Nonetheless, his nerves prickled, the idea that Halverson and Kent's shadowy network might still exist sending chills down his spine. Could they have watchers even now, 20 years later? Back at the hunting cabin, he showed Evelyn a handful of old clippings about Halverson and Kent's collapse. The articles mentioned a handful of executives indicted for fraud, though the charges were dropped or reduced. None of them addressed deeper crimes or anything related to trafficking. Evelyn hypothesized that the real ringleaders might still be free, operating under different shells. We need more tangible proof, she said, studying Caroline's diary. The references to child transport, and secret accounts are damning, but a diary alone won't convict them. Nathan rubbed the back of his neck, exhausted. Maybe Dad left more evidence somewhere. He was a thorough man. If he planned to blow the whistle, he might have had documents, recordings. His voice trailed off as a half-remembered scene surfaced. Graham hunched over a tape recorder late at night, scolding Nathan to go back to bed. Do you think he might have taped a confession or something? Evelyn's eyes lit up. Possible. We should search your old property thoroughly, or anywhere else your father might have hidden files. But the farmland is just a ruin now. They decided to scour the farmland once more, particularly the barn that had partially withstood the fire. The next morning, they set out at sunrise. The old barn stood behind the blackened farmhouse foundation, its roof caved in on one side but a portion still intact. Pigeons fluttered overhead as they navigated piles of rotted hay and debris. The stench of mildew and old ash hung in the stale air. Evelyn kept one hand on a flashlight, shining it into corners. After hours of searching, they unearthed little more than rusted tools and the remains of feed sacks. Disheartened, they were about to give up when Nathan noticed a loose floorboard near the far wall. Carefully prying it up, he revealed a small hollow space. Within lay a dusty cassette tape labeled in spidery handwriting, Graham's Confession. Heart hammering, Nathan lifted it out. Evelyn let out a soft exclamation. "We found something," she whispered, kneeling beside him. They returned to the cabin, rummaging for an old tape player. Nathan's hands trembled as he inserted the cassette and pressed play. Static crackled, then Graham Bishop's voice emerged, distant but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this, it means I failed to protect us. Halverson and Kent, they're laundering money, feeding a trafficking ring. I can't stay silent. They threatened me, threatened the kids, but I refused their hush money. I'm collecting all the evidence I can. Caroline wants me to be careful, but the world needs to know. If you find this, please, tell the police. Don't let them bury this." The recording ended abruptly in a burst of static. Nathan choked back a sob, hearing the raw fear in his father's words. Evelyn switched off the player, tears brimming in her own eyes. This is a crucial piece of evidence. It ties Halverson and Kent directly to horrifying crimes. And it suggests your father anticipated a violent response. She gently placed a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "We can't let his death be in vain. Let's see if we can get a law enforcement ally to handle this carefully, or they'll try to bury it again." They decided to reach out to an old detective friend of Evelyn's, Wallace Reed, a man known for stubborn honesty. He agreed to meet them in an out-of-the-way diner after hours. Nervous about being overheard, they slid into a back booth, hush in their voices. Reed's lined face frowned deeply as he listened to the tape. "I recall that case," he said, keeping his voice low. "The higher-ups told me it was just faulty wiring. I had my doubts but was told to drop them." He sighed heavily. "If Halverson and Kent or their cronies still wield influence, we have to be careful. We need someone at the state or federal level, not just local." Evelyn nodded. "We could try the state attorney's office, but we must approach someone we can trust. If the rot goes deep, we risk tipping them off." Reed mulled it over, then offered to contact a friend in the Attorney General's office. "He's clean as far as I know. But let's gather more first. They'll ask for solid proof beyond a single diary and tape." He looked at Nathan sympathetically. "I'm sorry you had to wait this long for justice, son." Nathan swallowed. "I just want them exposed for what they did. My father, Book, they never got a chance." He paused, recalling how the diary ended with Caroline's fear. "But there's also my mother. She wrote about making sure the children were safe if anything happened. I was told she died in the fire, but what if?" He stopped, the notion almost too painful to voice. Evelyn gave him a somber look. "It's possible she tried to negotiate or run. Halverson and Kent might have forced her to vanish. There's no record of her after that night, though." Nathan's chest felt tight. The idea that Caroline survived, forced into hiding or something worse, tormented him. Over the next week, they clandestinely approached archivists, old employees of Halverson and Kent, anyone who might recall rumors. They discovered the name Frank Delaney cropping up more than once, a fixer for the firm, known for handling sensitive issues. Officially, Delaney was declared dead in a car accident soon after the company's downfall. But Nathan suspected otherwise. If Delaney had arranged hits or threatened whistleblowers, maybe he arranged the fire. He might have taken Luke out before it fully spread. Could Luke have been abducted? The diary's references to saving the children echoed in Nathan's mind. If Luke was truly dead, so be it, but he had to be sure. One evening, a break arrived unexpectedly. An old clerk who once worked at Halverson and Kent recognized the photograph of Graham shaking hands with the unknown man. The clerk identified him as Frank Delaney indeed. He was bad news, the clerk whispered. Rumor was, if an employee got too nosy or rebellious, Delaney would pay them a visit and fix the problem. When the feds started investigating the firm, Delaney supposedly vanished. Some say he faked his death to avoid jail. Others say he was murdered by bigger sharks. Armed with this name, they scoured property records, hoping to find anywhere Delaney might have gone under an alias. Hours of digital searching turned up a remote cabin in northern Pennsylvania owned by Lefty Lane. The taxes were paid in cash, no phone listing. It was a long shot, but the coincidence of initials raised eyebrows. Could be him, Evelyn said. If he's alive, he might have the final puzzle pieces, and if he's the one who killed your father, we need him to face justice. Nathan gritted his teeth. If he took Luke or forced them to hand him over, I want answers. He stared at his father's photograph. Dad would want me to see this through. They set out in Evelyn's sedan, carefully evading any tail, though they weren't sure if watchers lurked. The journey took hours, twisting through rural roads. Dusk found them at a small lake ringed by tall pines. The cabin at the water's edge looked shabby, with curtains drawn. A single, older vehicle was parked outside. Evelyn turned off the car lights, exchanging a tense nod with Nathan. We go in carefully. They approached, hearts pounding. Evelyn rapped on the door. No response. She tried again. A creak from inside, then a voice rasped, Who are you? Evelyn Rice, she said calmly. And Nathan Bishop. We want to talk about Halverson and Kent and the Bishop fire. A heavy silence followed. Then the door opened a crack. A tall, haggard man stared out, gray stubble on his chin, eyes wary. He recognized Nathan at once, it seemed. Without warning, he tried slamming the door, but Nathan jammed his foot in the threshold. You know who I am, don't you? Nathan demanded, anger surging. You were there the night my family died. The man's expression twisted with guilt or fear. He let them in after a tense pause. The cabin reeked of stale coffee and old sweat. A single lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls. The man sank into a chair, coughing. So you lived after all? He exhaled shakily. I was told everyone died, but you jumped. Nathan's eyes blazed. You're Frank Delaney, right? The one who... He trailed off, voice trembling with emotion. Delaney nodded weakly. He confessed that Halverson and Kent had indeed orchestrated the fire to silence Graham. They said your father was about to blow the whistle on their trafficking pipeline. They didn't want that. Delaney swallowed, looking haunted. I was told to handle the situation, but I had no idea they'd torch the entire house with the family inside. By the time I realized, it was too late. The place was engulfed in flames. Nathan's fists clenched. What happened to Luke? Did he die in the fire or not? Delaney paused, dropping his gaze. Luke survived. I carried him out. He was barely conscious. The men wanted no loose ends. They told me to kill him. He gave a shudder. I couldn't do it. I had been complicit in a lot of things, but murdering a child, that was too far. I took Luke and disappeared, forging a new identity for him somewhere far away. Nathan felt the world spin. Alive? For 2 decades, he had believed his brother perished. He staggered, nearly collapsing into a chair. Evelyn pressed a hand to his back, eyes wide. Where is he now? She asked sharply. Delaney coughed again, looking drained. Last I knew, he was in Colorado. I left him with a family friend who owed me a favor, told them to raise him quietly under a new name. I never stayed in contact. I had to vanish. Halverson and Kent was out for blood once the investigation started. He looked at Nathan with hollow remorse. I'm sorry. I was part of it and I regret it every day. But Luke is alive, at least. For a moment, Nathan couldn't breathe. 20 years of guilt, grief, and heartbreak warred with a sudden blossoming of hope. Could Luke truly be out there, living under a false identity? He felt tears burning in his eyes. How do I find him? He whispered. Delaney gave what little info he had. A name, Michael Stone, and a small town in Colorado. He was about 10 when I placed him. He might not remember anything if the trauma was too great. I told them to keep his past a secret so no one would come looking. He looked away in shame. It was all I could do. Halverson and Kent murdered your father and threatened to kill the entire family. I tried to salvage one life. Sorry. Evelyn exhaled, blinking back tears. This is huge. Luke might be the living witness we need. If he can confirm that Halverson and Kent's men took him away, that means the fire was absolutely premeditated murder. She glared at Delaney. Why didn't you confess earlier? His lips tightened. I was a coward. I thought they'd kill me too. And maybe I deserved it. He gestured to a half-empty bottle of liquor on the table. I've been hiding, drinking myself half to death, waiting for the day they find me. Guess you found me first. They left Delaney in that dismal cabin, minds reeling with the revelation. Nathan's emotions churned, anger, disbelief, an aching sense of longing. If Luke was truly alive, nothing would stop him from crossing the country to see his brother again. Evelyn, though equally stunned, urged caution. Halverson and Kent might still have watchers. If we show up in Colorado asking about a teacher named Michael Stone, we risk tipping them off. Nathan's jaw tightened. I have to do this. I'd rather risk it than let Luke remain in the dark. They parted ways, Evelyn promising to contact Detective Wallace and see if they could arrange some protective measures. Nathan, meanwhile, prepared for a long drive west, determined to find the family Delaney mentioned. His mind spun with scenarios. What if Luke had no memory of them? What if he refused to believe the story, or had fled again? Through it all, a flicker of hope kindled. He was no longer alone in his quest for truth. The trip took several days. Nathan only slept in cheap motels, driving for hours across highways that stretched infinitely under wide skies. Every so often he'd think back to the farmland in Pennsylvania, the caretaker's chills, the old diaries that spoke of hush money and child trafficking. He thought of Caroline's final entry, if anything happens, it won't be an accident, and wondered what became of her. Delaney claimed ignorance, but perhaps she, too, had survived. He tried not to let false hope bloom. That was too big a wish. He eventually arrived in the mountainous region of Colorado Delaney had described. Quaint towns nestled between pine-clad slopes, the air crisp and carrying a faint scent of wood smoke. It was a stark contrast to the soggy farmland back east. He had a name, Michael Stone, and a suspicion that Luke would be about 30 years old now, a teacher if Delaney's information was correct. Checking local school listings led him to a small elementary school on the outskirts of a modest town. He parked outside the school, nerves wound tight, scanning the staff names on a bulletin board by the front office. Sure enough, there was a Michael Stone listed as a fourth-grade teacher. Heart pounding, he waited until the final bell rang, seeing children stream out in a laughing, colorful wave. Teachers followed to supervise pickup. Then he spotted a tall man with sandy hair, probably in his early 30s, guiding a group of kids across the parking lot. Nathan's breath caught. He saw faint echoes of Luke's features in that face, the shape of the eyes, the tilt of the chin. Could it truly be him? He waited until the children dispersed, steeling himself for the strangest conversation of his life. When the man finally walked back toward the school building alone, Nathan approached. Michael Stone, he asked, voice unsteady. The man turned, polite curiosity in his brown eyes. Can I help you? Nathan inhaled deeply, struggling to find words. I'm looking for my brother. He disappeared years ago. I think that might be you. Confusion flickered on the man's face. I'm sorry, you must have the wrong person. My parents died when I was a kid, in a car crash. I don't have siblings. Nathan's throat constricted with emotion. He pulled out the old braided bracelet Luke once wore, his only tangible link. Does this look familiar? The man froze, brow creasing. I'm not sure. But his eyes betrayed a spark of recognition, or at least a nagging sense of déjà vu. Nathan pressed on, voice shaking. Your name used to be Luke Bishop. Our father was Graham Bishop. Our mother Caroline. We lived on a farm in Pennsylvania. The house burned down. You were 10. I thought you died, but someone took you. He was aware how insane it sounded, but he had to lay it out there. Michael, or Luke, stepped back, confusion mingling with alarm. Look, I don't know what you're talking about. My name's Michael Stone. My adoptive parents said I was orphaned young. He paused, swallowing. But I do have these strange nightmares about fire, an old farmhouse, a boy calling my name. I always chalked it up to childhood trauma. Frank said. He broke off, frowning as if he'd said too much. Who is Frank? Delaney? Nathan pressed gently, hope surging. Michael Stone stared at him for a long moment, then lowered his voice. He was a friend of my adoptive family, visited sometimes, seemed to watch over me. He told me I was lucky to survive an accident. But he never explained more. He vanished when I was in my teens. The color drained from his face. Are you saying everything I know is a lie? Nathan exhaled, tears burning in his eyes. Yes. I'm your younger brother, Nathan. I can show you diaries from our mother, a confession tape from Dad, everything. Halverson and Kent had them all killed or forced them into hiding. Delaney said he rescued you to keep you from being murdered. Michael's expression flickered with anguish. He stared at the bracelet in Nathan's hand, as though some buried memory was surfacing. I remember a voice calling me Luke, in a dream, the smell of hay, a woman's laugh. Could that have been Mom? It took hours in a nearby cafe for them to sort through the story. Nathan showed him the diary pages mentioning Luke, pictures of them as children, the taped confession from Graham. Michael wept quietly, struggling to reconcile these revelations with the life he had known. My adoptive parents never gave me details, he said, voice hoarse. They just said the paperwork was sealed. I assumed it was from a private arrangement. I never questioned it much. By the end of the conversation, the man who had lived as Michael Stone accepted the near-impossible truth. He was Luke Bishop, forcibly uprooted from his real family. Overwhelmed by heartbreak and anger, he agreed to go back to Pennsylvania with Nathan, determined to confront the men who had destroyed their lives. I need to see if anything stirs my memories, he said. I owe it to Dad, to Mom. I can't keep living a lie. They departed Colorado soon after, Luke explaining to the school that he had a sudden family emergency. The drive back east was filled with awkward attempts at rekindling a bond that had been shattered 20 years earlier. Luke occasionally experienced flashes of recollection, knowing how to fix a tractor, the taste of fresh apples from the orchard, the bark of the old farm dog. Nathan felt a flood of relief, though the sorrow lingered. He also faced a new question. If Luke survived, what about Caroline? When they arrived in Pennsylvania, Evelyn welcomed them with a mixture of astonishment and hope. Seeing Luke in the flesh, she marveled at how fate had spared him. She arranged for them to meet Detective Wallace in secret, presenting Luke's testimony and the evidence from Graham's tape. Wallace was stunned. We have enough to pursue a major case against Halverson and Kent's old executives, he said. The trafficking ring might still exist in some capacity, or they've scattered. But if we can prove murder, no statute of limitations will save them. Luke recalled a half-remembered face from his childhood, a man in a suit who loomed over him the night of the fire. They suspected it was one of Halverson and Kent's higher-ups, possibly the same man in the photograph with Graham. Delaney's partial confession indicated the involvement of top-level individuals who orchestrated hits on whistleblowers. We must be careful, Wallace cautioned. They might have eyes everywhere, even now. Sure enough, suspicious signs emerged. A black SUV was spotted idling near Nathan's cabin at dusk, driving away when he approached. One night, Luke discovered someone rummaging near the property line, fleeing into the darkness when confronted. Their sense of danger grew, prompting Wallace to advise them to move to a temporary safe location. If they realize Luke is alive, he becomes a huge threat to their secrecy, Evelyn said grimly. With help from Wallace's contacts, they found refuge in a modest safe house, ironically an old cottage by a quiet lake. The setting was peaceful, but the tension was high. Luke struggled with identity crises, mourning the childhood he lost, the adoptive parents he left behind. Nathan tried to comfort him, sharing every memory he had of the old days, from sneaking cookies in the kitchen to chasing frogs by the creek. They wept together, united in grief but also in a fierce desire for justice. Meanwhile, Evelyn pursued the lead on Delaney's location. She wanted him to provide a sworn statement or risk being charged as an accessory to murder. Delaney, evidently spooked by Luke's reappearance, had fled his cabin. Nonetheless, Wallace used law enforcement channels to put out feelers for him. The net began to close on Halverson and Kent's remnants. Some minor ex-employees, fearful of prosecution, started giving up bits of information: shell companies, secret bank accounts, references to hush money. The more that surfaced, the clearer it became that Graham Bishop had threatened to blow open a far-reaching operation that funneled laundered funds into child trafficking networks overseas. While investigating deeper, they found references to C. Bishop in old, sealed case files, someone who had apparently been under the firm's watch. That raised the possibility that Caroline was alive, forced into hiding or taken as leverage. Luke's eyes shone with cautious hope. If she's out there, we have to find her. But the trail was cold. The files ended abruptly, as if someone took pains to erase her existence. Yet the suspicion that Caroline might have survived fueled them further. By now, the weight of Halverson and Kent's crimes galvanized Wallace and a handful of trusted colleagues to open an official inquiry. They convened with a district attorney sympathetic to the cause, presenting the diaries, the tape, and Luke's living testimony as a kidnap victim. The DA was appalled, promising a grand jury hearing if more direct proof of homicide emerged. "We'll likely see big arrests soon," the DA said. "But keep yourselves safe. These people are not above violence." Luke's sense of identity stabilized somewhat as he got used to the name he'd never expected to hear again. Meanwhile, Nathan felt a measure of guilt lifting off his shoulders. No longer did he blame himself for failing to save Luke that night. Learning Luke survived was both a miracle and a new burden of responsibility. They grew closer, forging a bond over late-night talks at the safe house, recalling fragments of their parents' personalities. If only Caroline were there to see them. Eventually, the legal machinery turned its gears. Indictments were prepared against several ex-executives of Halverson and Kent, people who had thrived in obscurity since the firm's collapse. Some had changed names, invested in legitimate businesses, or relocated overseas. Despite the time that had passed, the severity of the allegations, murder, conspiracy, child trafficking, ensured there was no expiration of accountability. The authorities planned a series of coordinated raids, aiming to catch suspects off guard. On the eve of these actions, a final piece of the puzzle emerged from an unexpected source. Nathan received an anonymous text. "Your mother. Old campsite. She waits." Alarmed, he showed it to Luke, who recognized mention of a campsite from faint childhood recollections. There was a scenic area in the Pocono Mountains they used to visit as a family. Could Caroline truly be there? Evelyn was wary. It could be a trap by Halverson and Kent. But if Caroline is alive, she might have reached out somehow. The timing is suspect. Luke insisted on investigating. The chance to see their mother overshadowed caution. Wallace arranged for a small protective escort. They drove into the mountains, searching for the campsite that used to be a beloved retreat in the summer. The roads were winding, the forest thick with pine. The air smelled of moss and impending rain. As they neared the spot, Nathan felt a pang of nostalgia for simpler days, when the worst fear in his life was stepping on a bee or losing his fishing rod in the creek. They found the campsite deserted at first glance, a ring of stones for a fire pit, a few logs for sitting, no sign of recent visitors. Disappointment settled in. Luke called out, "Mom?" hearing only echoes among the trees. Hours passed with no result. The escorts grew restless, suspecting a false lead. Then, at dusk, Nathan thought he saw movement near a cluster of trees. He and Luke crept closer, hearts pounding. A lone figure in a weathered coat stood there, hands trembling at her sides. Even in the dim light, they recognized Caroline's features, older, thinner, hair gone gray, but undeniably her. She stared at them, tears shining in her eyes. "Nathan? Luke?" Her voice quivered, raw with emotion. Luke stumbled forward. "Mom." That was all he could say before collapsing into her arms, sobs racking them both. Nathan joined, the three of them locked in an embrace so profound it momentarily erased the decades of terror. Caroline murmured apologies, heartbreak, relief. She explained in halting words how Halverson and Kent forced her to vanish, threatening to kill the children if she spoke. She had no idea Luke survived until rumors reached her that someone was reopening the Bishop fire case. She took a chance, returning to the campsite, a place she had once promised to come if all else failed. By the time they returned to the safe house, the family was reunited but also deeply shaken by the past. Caroline's testimony, once she mustered the courage to give it, proved the final nail in Halverson and Kent's coffin. She recounted how they threatened Graham, how they set the fire, how she escaped in the chaos and spent years in hiding, always afraid to surface. With this, the circle was complete. The DA moved swiftly, coordinating with federal authorities to arrest the last key conspirators. News of the case broke nationally, the Bishop family's story of betrayal and survival capturing headlines. Tension peaked when a black SUV attempted to ambush them one final time outside the safe house. The protective detail engaged, shots were fired, but no one was harmed. The assailants fled. That confrontation marked the last gasp of Halverson and Kent's enforcers. Within days, major arrests rolled in. Court proceedings began, revealing the horrifying scope of the firm's laundering for child trafficking. The public responded with outrage, demanding maximum sentences. The individuals who orchestrated Graham's murder found themselves indicted not just for financial crimes, but for conspiracy to commit homicide. Luke, still grappling with the dual identity of Michael Stone, took the stand to describe his abduction. Nathan testified about the diaries, the tape, the black SUV sightings. Caroline, in a trembling voice, confirmed every detail of how her husband tried to protect them, how Delaney spirited Luke away, how she was forced to vanish. Evelyn and Detective Wallace watched from the gallery, hearts full, seeing justice at last. The trials concluded with convictions, guaranteeing that Halverson and Kent's leadership would never again wield power. The scope of the trafficking ring, once hidden, was fully exposed, leading to further crackdowns. At long last, the storm receded. Nathan and Luke, freed from the shadows, returned to the farmland that had once been their home. Caroline accompanied them. Together, they stood on the site of the old farmhouse, overgrown with wildflowers. The charred debris had been cleared away by county workers some years back. A gentle breeze rustled the grass. Luke closed his eyes, trying to conjure childhood memories. Caroline knelt, running a hand over the soil, tears slipping down her cheeks. She whispered a soft goodbye to Graham, mourning him anew but also feeling the weight of guilt lift. Nathan placed a simple wooden marker at the edge of the property, bearing the Bishop name. It was their quiet memorial for a father who died fighting a monstrous system. The final months brought healing in increments. Nathan, once racked by guilt, found purpose in rebuilding parts of the land. Luke decided to remain in Pennsylvania for a while, forging a deeper bond with the mother and brother he'd been separated from. Caroline, though haunted by her years in hiding, found solace in reuniting with her children. Evelyn, satisfied, moved on to consulting for federal agencies tackling corruption, but she stayed in touch, close to the family she had helped. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the Bishop family gathered by a small pond near the farmland, a place Luke vaguely recalled from boyhood. They laid out a simple picnic, speaking about the past without the old ache of secrecy. Luke recounted his Colorado life as a teacher, and Nathan teased him about rewriting all those official forms with his real name. Caroline listened, smiling through quiet tears. She realized the seeds of a new beginning were planted here, among the ashes of old tragedies. She saw the same determined spirit in her sons that Graham once carried. And so, after 20 years of silence, the truth emerged. Halverson and Kent's conspirators sat behind bars, Child trafficking victims who had once been invisible found new support as the ring was dismantled, and the bishop name was cleared of the ugly whispers that had once surrounded the fire. Life continued, scarred but hopeful. If you found this story compelling and believe, as the bishops did, that no dark secret should remain buried, please remember to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. Thank you so much for watching.